So it took a couple of minutes to bop out all the little dents in the skin of the side door. First step on installing the skin on this door is to install the peephole. And I don't want the peephole to leak. So I'm going to use some of this black mastic, just a pinch, and I'm going to roll it into a really, really thin thread of mastic and wrap it around the peephole. And then I'm going to hold it up and install the other side, the nut on the peephole. The nut has a slot for a very, very large screwdriver. I didn't have one that large. So in order to tighten it, I used the backside of a kitchen knife.
As I was installing the peephole, I wanted to ensure that the skin was exactly lined up with the plywood. Once the peephole was secured, then I began installing the aluminum trim around the outside of the door. I wanted to spread the blows from the rubber dead blow hammer over a lot of area of the trim. You don't want to hit it a lot in one spot. You do not want to damage the door skin, and you don't want to damage the aluminum trim either. So you have to be patient with this, and you have to work it on. I installed all 4 trim pieces before I screwed any of them on to ensure that they were all going to fit together as they're supposed to. After all 4 pieces were installed, then I began screwing it down. I was using stainless steel number 8 by 3/4 inch wood screws with a panhead Phillips screw head. I use these screws because they wouldn't rust. However, they are pretty soft and the Phillips part will strip out fairly easy. So I decided to go ahead and drill out every hole in advance. And I was using like a 1/32 drill bit, a very small drill bit, just to get the screws to get started. Now you'll notice that I only screwed on the bottom trim, the back side of the trim, opposite of the handle, and the top trim. The trim over by the handle will be removed in a minute to be able to work on the door handle. Now I took off the trim and placed the original plywood on top of the new door plywood just to make sure that the door handle was going to be aligned correctly. I flipped the door over and began installing these interior screws on the 3 trim pieces that were on the door. These trim pieces are going to hold the door skin and the plywood together so that when I do cut the hole for the door handle, it's going to be in exactly the right spot. I used a large hole saw, 2.5, 3 inches will be fine, to drill a hole where the door handle was going to be. And then I used a wood saw blade on a sawzall to cut the rest of the wood out to match the hole in the door skin. Keep in mind that this video is sped up so that I'm not boring you to death. So you really have to take your time and do this right. You only get one shot, and if you mess it up, you get to buy a new piece of plywood. Next, I used a router to route out part of the door, again, to match up the door handle. Next, I put some of that mastic around the outside of the door. I rolled it to a thin bead so I could lay the mastic all the way around and it would seal the door handle to the door skin. And I did a test fit. Now that I know that the hole is right and the door handle is going to fit the door, now I'm going to install the aluminum trim piece on the door handle side. There are exterior screws and interior screws for every piece of trim. After the trim was installed, it's time to put the final installation on the door handle. Because my door handle was designed for an 1.5-inch thick door, and my door is only 3/4 inch thick, I had to use a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and make a spacer for the door handle to fit my door. And that was covered in a previous video, and I'll put a link to that previous video in the top right-hand corner right now. When I tighten the door, it squeezes out some of the mastic around the outside of the door. And so I'm using a razor knife to trim the black mastic off so that I have a neat installation. And then we have to seal the trim to the door. And I'm using a quick dry silicone latex all the way around the trim around the door. And I'm going to put it on the heads of all the screws on the outside of the door as well. The next step in this build was to create a plate out of aluminum that will cover the door catch that I'm not going to be using anymore. We're going to use a new door catch in a different location. So I used some 1/8 inch aluminum stock that I had and a hacksaw and a file in my vise to shape it into an oval. I also used my palm sander to smooth out the edges and give it a little bit more of a natural round look to it. Then I put a couple of marks and punches for 2 screw holes. I drilled 2 screw holes about 1/8 inch thick for the same stainless steel screws to fit through. Put some of the mastic down, stick the plate down, drill 2 holes, and put some silicone in the holes as I put the screws in. And then put silicone all the way around the edge of the plate. And then you have a nice, neat installation. Next comes the fun of installing the side door, and I decided to choose a day when the wind was blowing at 30 to 40 miles an hour. This is difficult alone, and I would not recommend doing it by yourself. My wife was nice enough to help me out in this, and it took both of us to hold that door up there and get it screwed on correctly. You have 4 screws, 2 in each hinge, and everything has to line up exactly right in order for the threads to catch. It is a physical challenge to get that door installed. You'll see that I used clamps to help hold the door in place on that top hinge. That bolt was giving us a very hard time. I tried pushing it up with myself, my legs, and my hands, and I could not keep that door up to the point to where she could get the nut to catch on the threads in there. So you'll see that I used a bottle jack to push the door up, and we eventually got the fasteners tightened on the door, and the door fit squarely. The door latch caught exactly right, and from the side view you can see that the gap on the door is uniform from top to bottom. Thanks for watching. If you learned something, please subscribe.